Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update, brought to you by AgCarolina Farm Credit. Well, I thought I'd start us off by taking a look here at a satellite animation from the day on Sunday. There you saw it play all the way out. Let's take a look at this and really talk about some of the major features we're going to be watching at the beginning of this week. Well, this large cloud shield is the remnants of Gordon. If you remember in last week's update, we were watching Gordon coming out of the Caribbean, out of the Gulf of Mexico, then turning right here and going across the Corn Belt. Well, it has now been absorbed into the mid-level atmospheric flow, and what we have right now draped across as we get into the night on Sunday night into Monday morning, we have right in through here, draped across this region, a pretty strong boundary on which Gordon is feeding on, and will be that boundary to start off the week that brings quite a bit of shower and thunderstorm activity, early in the week to parts of the Carolinas. But that is certainly nothing in comparison to what we're going to be talking about here mid to end of this week in terms of hurricane activity. So we better get to that part of the forecast pretty quickly here. Now, just to show you the setup going into this forecast, I've got two maps. One map over here on the left shows you the last 20 days of total accumulated precipitation. And the one on the right shows you the last 30 days looking at percent of normal. Now, the reason why I went 20 days on the map on the left is because over the last 20 days, we've had major flooding situations setting up across the Corn Belt. And that's important for AgCarolina, given the number of crops that are shared that are grown in the Carolinas and grown in the middle part of the country. Our soybeans are having trouble with this. This is certainly the time period of year that the soybeans in the Corn Belt and the soybean belt are trying to dry down and transition. And what's happened is with all this heavy rain, fields are soaked, and there's concern about the stand quality of those beans. Just to kind of give you a number here, if you just look over there at that graph on the right, the whole country in the last 20 days has received 26 trillion gallons of water. 26 trillion. Where's it not been wet? Here. Look at this over here on the map showing you percent of normal. This has been a very dry region in the eastern half of the country here, and that could all change very quickly. So let's talk about that. Here's what the next 5 days looks like for us across the United States. Now, what are we watching? We're going to be watching basically the remnants of Gordon kind of interacting with this dashed line, which is the boundary in the day on Monday. So this is what's going to bring Monday into maybe even into Tuesday the chances for widely scattered showers and storms across the Carolinas. Now, after that, before Florence get here, we're going to talk a lot about Florence in a few moments, we're going to watch a trio of low-pressure systems going across Canada. Now, why talk about those? Well, they're so far north that they're not going to be even large enough to drag a cold front that could possibly get down toward the southeastern coast, down toward the Carolina coast. And why I'm bringing that up is, if all the storm systems stay up here, there will be nothing impeding Florence to knock Florence back as Florence comes on shore. Now, before we get into this discussion about Florence, I will tell you this. We are watching quite a bit of tropical thunderstorm activity coming up in parts of Texas and Louisiana as well. So this impacts some of the crops that are also grown here. I'm thinking peanuts and cotton and stuff like that. This region is going to get hit pretty hard down here on the Gulf Coast. But we will be watching a bigger system coming through the U.S.-Canadian border next Sunday, and that could be important for Florence, but that's pretty far out in the forecast. Okay, with that as the setup, let's figure this one out. Pattern on the left first, and we'll talk about temperatures on the right, and then get into Florence here. Ready? Now, what's so important about Florence is this. You see, the pattern that's allowing Florence to slam into the United States is a massive ridge over Alaska. That's right. Alaska is setting this up. You see, this big ridge that's been building in Alaska is allowing a deep trough to extend from the North Pole all the way to the Pacific Northwest. And that has set up this rather substantially large ridge that's going across the eastern part of the country. Now, why is that important? Well, that is placing the main part of this ridge right here, and it's a big one, big area of higher air pressure. And in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the flow actually around all ridges, surface or upper level base, doesn't matter. You get clockwise flow, and that is what is going to steer Florence right here into the Carolina coast. Now, a week ago, we didn't know if that ridge was going to be here, if it was going to be way up here, if it was going to be farther out to the east, or if it was still going to be sitting over like Maine. There was all that uncertainty a week ago, but now that we're about 4 days out from when Florence makes landfall here early Monday morning, we know where the ridge is going to be, and it is strong. And so Florence is going to have to tuck right underneath it, and that's going to shove it farther to the south. Now, what are we going to do? Now, before we get any farther, what are we going to be dealing with in terms of temperatures long term? Let me erase my drawings here and let me stretch this on out for you. So Florence comes on shore. We'll talk more about that in a minute. What I do see with time is, because of cloud cover from Florence, things are going to be cool toward the end of the week. They're going to start off cool this week. Now, what I'm interested in seeing is what happens once we're done with Florence. And it looks as though by the time we get into that third week of September, all the cold air retreats to, well, North Pole. And as a consequence, we get broad-scale ridging across the country. But I think we could be seeing a cooler pattern in the Northern Plains, Great Lakes, and much of the Northeast because of this setup. We'll have to see how far south that gets into the Carolinas. So just something I want to be watching for the third week. Now, if we get into the temperature forecast, this is a temperature anomaly map every 6 hours. So the cooler colors here represent cooler than average weather, and the reds here represent warmer than average weather. As we slide through, see the cloud cover from Gordon? Then, let me pause this. Sorry, went a little fast there for you. Then we can see, here's Florence right here. This is Wednesday, getting into Thursday, coming on shore. The cloud cover from Florence certainly keeping things cool in the Carolinas here. But overall around it, warmer than average conditions will prevail throughout much of this week into the end of this week. Now, what we will be watching at the end of the forecast is this. This is next Monday, Tuesday. Big cold front comes slicing through the Great Lakes, and then it possibly gets all the way down into the Carolinas. But until then, you are really dealing with two tropical systems. The remnants of Gordon and Florence are going to be bringing your precipitation. So let's talk about it. The tropics are active. I'm making this video about 2 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, so early in the morning. And I want to let you know something. It's September 10th. That is the peak in the hurricane season, and we have got them lined up. Are you ready? Helene, Isaac, Florence, 3 hurricanes in the Atlantic. We're watching this thing brew here in the tropics, down here in the Caribbean, getting into the Gulf of Mexico to hit Texas. Gordon's remnants, the leftovers going through the Northeast. We have Paul, Olivia, Norton in the Pacific, and a deep coastal low and an even deeper low sitting off the Aleutian Islands. With all of this activity, predictability beyond about day 7 to day 10 is nearly impossible. But let's see what we've got coming forward. We've got very strong model agreement that by Thursday, Wednesday night into Thursday morning, we'll be watching the outer rain bands of Florence coming right here onshore, probably somewhere close to the Outer Banks, getting all the way down into the Carolina coast. I'm sorry, the North and South Carolina border. Now, there's still some spread. There's still some uncertainty, and the trend has been south at times here. But what I want everybody watching this video to listen to me say is this. We could possibly see Florence go on shore, stall somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, in Virginia, in North Carolina, maybe even getting back into West Virginia, maybe even Kentucky, Tennessee, this area, and then potentially turning right back around, coming back out. Now, we're going to have the initial threat of the strong winds once it makes landfall. This is nothing new to the Outer Banks. This is nothing new to Cape Hatteras. This is what they get. What I'm mostly concerned about is the flooding threat. Remember, the Carolinas has sustained multiple 1,000-year flood events in the last 5 years. And so we're going to be watching this one very, very carefully. Flooding is your major threat at this point. Strength of this system when it makes landfall, how strong Florence going to be? Well, right now, some of the models are projecting a Cat 3, which is major, possibly up to a Category 4 strength storm as we work through the next 2.5 to 3 days. So we're going to have to watch it. Out ahead of Florence, wind shear is low, ocean temperatures are warm. That's a favorable environment. Once it begins to interact with land on Wednesday getting into Thursday, we see a pretty substantial drop off in strength, but that's always what happens when these systems make landfall. They begin to drop off in strength, but still a powerful storm. Your biggest threat is flooding, and this is what I want you to see. Over there on the left, that's the European model forecast for the next 10 days of precip, and on the right, I have the GFS 10 days of precip. Now, the European model has been the model that has pinned down the track of this low the best. They've had the best handle on that upper level ridge that sits here that keeps guiding Florence farther south. And what do we see? We see a large pocket of North Carolina experiencing in excess of 8 to maybe 10 plus inches of rain. There will be some locally heavier rains when you get up into the mountains right in through here. So my biggest concern is, does Florence go on shore and then keep moving, or does Florence stall and backtrack? If it stalls and backtracks, we are in serious trouble for flooding, and there's the potential for that right now. The GFS model has this a little bit farther to the north, but that makes sense. The GFS also has the ridge farther to the north, allowing Florence to kind of curl around a bit more. But I'm going to tell you something, the European model has been the best performer, so we're going to pay attention to that model. That's the one that I'm going to stick with here. So again, you need to be paying very close attention to what's going on with this system. National Hurricane Center is your best source. Go to nhc.noaa.gov, nhc.noaa.gov. The National Hurricane Center has the best information. That's the group that gives everybody else the information about hurricanes. So listen to them very, very carefully. I want to let you know one other thing as we finish up this video. Following Florence, we have got Isaac. And Isaac is also of concern right now because Isaac is currently taking a much farther south route. And if Isaac does get over here into the Caribbean and starts to curl in to the Gulf of Mexico, this could mean trouble for the Gulf Coast states. But a lot of times the remnants of these systems come right up the East Coast just like this, which could bring, now this is maybe 12 to 15 days out, could be bringing some more precipitation to the same regions that Florence could drench. Now that's a long ways out in the forecast, and I'm kind of speculating here on what it could possibly do, but I want to keep you aware of what we're watching in the tropics. So please keep an eye on all of this as we move forward throughout this week. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this forecast video. We at AgCarolina, I hope you look forward to our next update coming out next week. In the meantime, please be safe when it comes to the track here of Florence and its potential impact on the Carolinas. I'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you.